In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of men can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is common sense.
I'm Mark Zaccaria.
I'm April Giarrusso. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. Here in Rhode Island, the legislative season is heating up. Leadership in the House and Senate have joined the Raimondo administration to force a system of toll gantries on a populace completely unconvinced of the need for them. The governor's State of the State address gave us a pretty clear map of her priorities. As usual, Common Sense will cover all these stories and more. This week, State Representative Patricia Morgan will conduct an in-depth interview with Rep. Blake Philippi of Charlestown and Block Island. Together, they'll explore details of what will be happening in the House this session. Between segments of that discussion, Mark and I will reappear to bring a little satiric levity to the show as we ask our favorite question, are you kidding me? Commentator Jeff Richard will conclude the broadcast with his insights on escalating state debt. To kick off that lineup, we will begin with analysis of some of the top news stories around the Ocean State today. Mark?
Thanks, April. Governor Gina Raimondo delivered the second budget address of her administration last week. Informally known as the State of the State, it was the governor's opportunity to lay out her vision of the new fiscal year and to sell her ideas to the General Assembly. The first thing that stood out in her presentation was its price tag, a little over $9 billion. That's up by nearly a full billion from the budget she inherited when she took office last year. In a state which perennially runs a deficit, everybody in the House chamber to hear the speech and all the folks at home watching on TV knew right away there was some big borrowing to be done if all that was going to work out. The governor's themes for the coming year were stated as jobs, education, and workforce development. True to those goals, she outlined big spending directed at each of them. $35.5 million for recreation, green spaces, and healthy communities, along with $40 million in borrowing for housing opportunities, seem to indicate that Roadmap Rhode Island will be alive and well in FY17. She proposed $45.5 million in new debt for higher education. One hopes there will be some detail in the documentation for that one. Are we planning to add capital assets to our state college system, or will the money be used for subsidized tuitions? $40 million in new debt was slated for construction of new public schools in Rhode Island. I understand that matching funds for school building projects are exhausted and our existing building stocks are crumbling for lack of maintenance, but that's still money we don't have. One possible bright spot was a proposed $70 million bond scheme to finance much-needed infrastructure renovation at the Port of Davisville. That facility is one of the top 10 ports of entry on the East Coast. One hopes the governor means to structure that financing so the proceeds from operating the port are used to repay the loan. Please? Sadly, the governor's address contained nothing about the renovation of the culture of our state that has to be the first step towards reinvigorating its local economy. There was no suggestion of metrics or standards of productivity to which she would hold the state bureaucracy to ensure cost control and efficiency in providing government services. With $500 million in new debt under consideration, it seems unlikely that any tax reductions or other reductions of government-mandated business overhead expenses will be forthcoming. Without a financial benefit to be had, no business is going to grow here, much less relocate. In the end, it seemed fitting that Ms. Raimondo made her budget address on Groundhog's Day. We've seen all this before, and it didn't work then either. April?
Thanks, Mark. The plan to erect toll gantries around the state has become the latest example of a cartoon snowball. The more it rolls downhill, the more size and speed it gains. It should be noted that the seeming inevitability of a widespread toll infrastructure in our immediate future is gathering influence despite the many indications ordinary Rhode Islanders do not want it. Last week, Common Sense reported on a statewide poll by Fleming & Associates that found 2-to-1 opposition to the plan out in the hustings. The hard-working taxpayers of Rhode Island seem to display some wisdom by taking that position. Even average folks understand that our local economy is staggering under the weight of taxes, over-regulation, and slow-motion service from government. So the idea of forcibly sucking another $60 million or so per year out of this house of cards business environment is unsustainable. Too bad the legislative and executive branches don't see it that way. When it comes to organizations taking a position against the toll plan, all the usual suspects are lined up. The Rhode Island Public Expenditures Council, the Rhode Island Center for Freedom and Prosperity, the Gatsby Project, the Rhode Island Taxpayers, the Tea Party, Ocean State Taxpayers in Action, and the Republican Policy Group are all actively opposing this plan. Ominous predictions on the plan's failure are also coming from the Rhode Island Independent Contractors and Associates, RI Independent Truckers Association, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, and a number of other industry groups that will be directly affected. Despite all this pushback, the elites of Smith Hill are forging ahead with the creation of this latest revenue trough at which to feed. Committee hearings in both the Senate and the House last week were predictable exercises in kabuki theater. That is, they were ritualized pantomimes of representative government in which DOT filibustered, committee members worked their smartphones, and the public comment was scheduled at the most inconvenient times for average working folks. The toll plan snowball will now come roaring into each of the chambers for near instantaneous passage, and we will have the second coming of 38 Studios. Or perhaps it's 38 Studios times 10. How can legislators keep passing egregious spending measures like this, you ask? Because they fear no retribution from the electorate. Nothing in the last few decades of Rhode Island history suggests that any of these birds will lose their cushy jobs for mismanaging your money that way. Let's hope it's different this time, because that would be news. Mark?
Thank you, April. Riverside's Fran Brailsford, writing in the Providence Journal last week, questioned the administration's need to have a chief innovation officer on staff as a separate department head. Ms. Brailsford contrasted Rhode Island's expenditure of perhaps $500,000 per year for salaries, office space, and staff for its new CIO to what she sees in neighboring Massachusetts. There, rookie Republican Governor Charlie Baker has cut Bay State expenditures by at least $50 million, while also instilling a new corporate culture of economic friendliness in the Commonwealth's public service employees. Fran Brailsford's conclusion after reviewing the evidence she offered couldn't be more stark. Mass gets the GE headquarters and a sky dotted with towering construction cranes, while Rhody gets nagging questions about funding the CIO boondoggle through the ostensibly private Rhode Island College Foundation. These are the stakes in the game we are playing, folks. It's a game scored in dollars, and the trophy is general prosperity, not individual wealth. The most successful strategy in this game of competing jurisdictions is also the most counterintuitive. It makes no sense to those who lack vision, but here it is. The only way to achieve sustainable individual success is for government to play for sustainable general prosperity. Fran Brailsford believes that's what Charlie Baker is doing. Nobody believes that anybody in Rhode Island government is even trying to do that. So our political leaders will fail to make their own personal scores by failing to look first to the good fortunes of their constituents. I hate being a victim of irony. I do disagree with Fran Brailsford on one point, though. I think our state government does need a chief innovation officer, but I think that set of tasks needs to be one part of the job description of its chief executive officer, also known as the governor. April?
Thanks again, Mark. Now, while we are teeing up the first segment of Representative Patricia Morgan's interview this week, let's take a break to ask the soul-searching question, are you kidding me?
Recently, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo suspended the rights of the fantasy sports site DraftKings to operate in the Empire State. Cuomo did this despite the fact that a New York corporation, Fox Sports, was a major investor. The reason for the suspension was simple. DraftKings and its main competitor, FanDuel, were taking money from ordinary citizens at a bodacious and unregulated rate. Upon hearing this news, Rhode Island State Representatives Jared Nunes and Robert Jacquard said, "Wait, what? Money from ordinary citizens at a bodacious and unregulated rate? We could do that." Are you kidding me? I kid you not. The two Ocean State Solons immediately teamed up to produce House Bill 7075. If passed into law, this measure requires the Division of Racing and Athletics to create a one-day fantasy sports site based on the DraftKings model. Their bill contains plenty of sanctimonious language asserting that this is a game of skill rather than a game of chance. Heaven forfend. So the two entrepreneurial lawmakers are trying to legislate themselves a gold mine. Ignore the fact that their plan cuts the lottery commission out of the money loop, although requiring lottery sales agents to also carry the cards that initiate their game. Nunes and Jacquard are probably hoping that governors across the nation follow Mr. Cuomo's lead to shut down the big players. That kind of regulation would carve out a nice little niche for Rhode Island's offering. To them, it is apparently of no matter that get-rich-quick schemes are the most regressive form of taxation. They bite the hardest at the budgets of those least able to afford the hit. Well, I guess I applaud the opportunism of their lightning strike to seize this moment. I'd have to ask if even they believe that this is the kind of business government should be in. There is, of course, one more question. Are you kidding me?
Find us on Cox Channel 15 or Verizon Channel 34, Saturday at 4 p.m. or Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on the web at www.gatsbyproject.com/Common Sense Rhode Island. Like us on Facebook at Common Sense RI, and follow us on Twitter at @Common Sense RI.
Hi, I'm Gladys, and I just had to come back to the show this week. We got a problem here. Are you kidding me? I was talking to my daughter Lev the other day. She said, Ma, we got an issue with synthetics. And I said, what? Synthetics? Trixie at the salon said, I bet they'll ban those polyesters, nylons, and that stretchy lycra stuff. You know what this means? If they take away synthetics, that Hillary can't wear that orange jumpsuit on TV. Bank robbers can't cover their faces anymore. And my mother is going to expand 20 times over without that lycra. It's like watching a ball of pizza dough rise at warp speed. It's a disaster. Liv says it's got to do with global warming. Not for nothing, but we's launching a protest. We's going all over the place with these signs here. Stretch the truth. Screw the ban. Save the synthetics.
Hey, moron! It's ethics, not synthetics. Ethics!
Ethics? Not synthetics? What's that? Are you kidding me? Forget about it.
Welcome to Common Sense Rhode Island. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we have with us today my colleague Anthony Giarrusso, representative from East Greenwich. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. Anthony, by the time this airs, we're actually taping this on Tuesday afternoon, and by the time this airs, I think that the toll proposal will have passed.
I think so too.
Yeah, it's what it feels like down in the State House. I know that there are a lot of people, me included and you, who are continuing to fight it up to the bitter end, but just reading the tea leaves, a lot of arms have been twisted, a lot of things have been promised, and I think that the Democrats are going to vote this through. I would like to mention to everybody that no Republicans are voting for this toll proposal on either the House or the Senate side. You know, we've done a lot of talking. I know we've been called the loud minority of no. Do you think we're a minority?
I think it sounds like the very loud minority of we got to do this for the right reason, for the people. It's hurting a lot of people. And we're sending a message like, don't come to Rhode Island if you're a business, or if you are a business and you're in Rhode Island, get out, because we don't care about you. Nothing said that more than Mr. Perlman from Ocean State Job Lot. He poured his heart out on us and that finance committee. And what do we do? It's like just a blind eye, deaf ear. We built a bridge for him. We built a highway for him. No, we didn't. You know, that's how you would operate a second grade classroom. That's not how you operate a state. And what I'm telling all my constituents, there's no issue that I've had more emails, phone calls, letters than this one. This is even more than the Pawsox. And what I'm telling them is I'm against this because it hurts. most of the people. It only helps the special interest. So what I urge everybody to do is contact your rep and your senator, tell all your friends, your family, your neighbors that don't live in this district that they're not going to stand for it because it's a very hurtful, it's a toll/tax, it's very hurtful, and just urge them that don't vote for this, and if they do that, you're either going to run against them or you're going to help their opponent.
Okay, which is the second half of this program. But, so you've gotten a lot of calls, and I know that when we were just leaving the State House after the House Finance Committee meeting, where we voted out the bill, over my strenuous objections, that you were talking to some business folks out in the hallway. And what was the message they were bringing to you?
They just can't believe that there can be so many unanswered questions in a piece of legislation that has more holes in it than Swiss cheese, and yet it just got blindly passed out of committee. And they're wondering, what are these people getting for their votes? They're not asking questions, they just vote yes. And they just can't believe that their government that they grew up in, they live here, they love it here, and they're part of they're giving us some economic, they're helping our economy. They got jobs, they pay in taxes, and what do? We just turn our backs on them.
Yeah, the lack of real due diligence is really, I think that's really troubling, because if we get this wrong, this is 38 Studios on steroids.
Oh my God, yes.
Right? I mean, 38 Studios was 75 million. This is $1 billion. And eternal tolls.
Right.
And if the revenue doesn't show up, I think it falls back on taxpayers.
Of course. It did with 38 Studios.
It did with 38 Studios, right. So all of these promises, I mean, you keep hearing the tortured reasoning from the governor and the speaker, just tortured, seriously. Truckers who make $1,000 a week gladly, willingly drove across the Pawtucket Bridge so they could pay a $3,000 fine. I mean, it makes you want to laugh or cry that they actually, these people who are supposed to be looking out for Rhode Island are telling these kinds of stories.
To me, it's actually, I think it's being disrespectful to the average Rhode Islander to let someone believe that a trucker will willingly pay $3,000 rather than take $2.95 and what is it, 6 miles difference? If you take $2.95 over 95 and you're going to end up somewhere in Attleboro or beyond, that makes no sense. And you're telling your voters that you're stupid. I'm smarter than you, and you're going to believe that a trucker will willingly do that to save 5 minutes.
Yeah. Seriously. All right, you said that very well. You said that very well. Job Lot, they are really committed to Rhode Island. They've made a commitment to stay here and grow here when it was easier to grow in other states. They are in 8 states now. And they were saying that the tolls they pay in all those other states, and they have 18-wheelers that deliver stuff to them. They put it in their warehouse, they put it on other trucks, and they send it out to their stores. So they have trucks coming and going all day long.
Right.
And when they actually studied it, they found that they spend $150,000 on tolls in all those other 8 states.
Right.
If this toll proposal is passed, and I guess it's going to be, it will be $1 million just to Rhode Island alone. Like 600 or 7,000% more. That's a lot.
Right.
Right? And it's not just them. I heard on the radio that Benny's is saying, please don't do this to us. Takeo, please don't do this to us.
Cumberland Farms, I mean, just add it, just go, the list goes on and on.
Furniture stores, everybody they're just kind of gripping and hoping that we won't do this because they can't sustain that kind of a hit. Right?
Right, and the irony with one of the biggest insults that I took out of the testimony from Mr. Perlman from Ocean State Job Lot is when he said that they give away so much food to the food banks of the communities that they serve, and it would cost them an estimated $40,000 a year to deliver free food. That's how much it would cost them in tolls. That's a mouthful.
That is, yeah. They actually are the largest contributor or donator of food to food banks in New England.
No good deed goes unpunished, apparently.
Obviously not. Obviously not. Now, you're a small businessman, and I don't want you to comment necessarily on the tolls, but you have a responsibility when you're a businessman to make sure that your company lives. That
Do it every day.
That it stays in business, because you have employees who depend on you to make sure it doesn't fall. Right?
Right.
I mean, it's one thing for you to say, oh, well, I'll pay it. But if you pay it, you might hurt your employees, and every single one of them needs that paycheck. So what I took from Mr. Perlman is, I can't take $1 million hit a month without hurting my employees.
Or his customers.
Or his customers. That's right. And that's what he was saying. I can't pay it. I'm going to have to pass it on.
Right.
So ultimately, who's going to pay the tolls?
We all are. It's a tax.
It's a tax, right? And we won't feel it right away. It'll be 5 cents in our hamburger, and it'll be 10 cents in the aspirin, and, our dress might cost another 50 cents or something. But it's $45 million, and every family is going to absorb a good part of that.
Right.
Okay. Well, thank you for telling me I'm right.
Yeah, of course you're right. And here's
Because they're not telling me that down in the State House.
And here's another reason that you're right.
Well, hang on a minute, because we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be right back.
The governor found an extra $124.8 million to spend in her new budget. Are you kidding me? So I've been kvetching and moaning about the DOT wasting $3 million when there was a magic $124.8 lying around just waiting to be spent. How big are the couch cushions on Smith Hill that this much money could be available and no one noticed? That's gross. Not gross negligence, not gross waste, just gross. Raimundo's proposed new budget, according to Catherine Gregg of the Providence Journal, relies on a projected increase in state revenue from state taxes and fees, as well as revenue-raising initiatives like the hike in the cigarette tax. It also includes some purging, and I love a good government purge. But they're selling the state car fleet, so they'll need to replace those vehicles, right? Maybe with leased cars that are brand new and cost the state a pretty penny in property tax? Well, Governor Raimondo did call out the multi-agency system we have for detecting fraud and how that has caused miscommunication. But the proposed budget includes hiring a contractor to investigate and audit state agencies. Why can't we use one of those miscommunicating fraud detecting agencies we've already got to do that job? Or better yet, actually fix the administrative system beforehand. If you have indeed saved us an extra $124.8 million, could you do us the honor of not turning right back around and wastefully spending it? Are you kidding me?
Find us on Cox Channel 15 or Verizon Channel 34, Saturday at 4 p.m. or Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on the web at www.gatsbyproject.com/Common Sense Rhode Island. Like us on Facebook at Common Sense RI, and follow us on Twitter at @Common Sense RI.
Welcome back to Common Sense Rhode Island. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and we have with us today Representative Anthony Giarrusso from East Greenwich. And you were just starting a thought in our last segment, and I cut you off. So what were you going to say?
Well, my thought is the last Thursday when we had the House Finance hearings, the day before that they had the Senate Finance hearings. And there were hundreds of construction workers out there rallying for this bill because it was going to be jobs for them, for their trades.
Sure.
But what didn't go unnoticed with me anyway is that the Republican plan, the alternative, which was sponsored by you, still fixes all the roads and bridges. But the only difference is, rather than waiting 2 years to have these people working on these projects, they could have done it already. They could be doing it today.
That's right.
So,
as soon as the bill was passed, the money could have been made available to get those people back to work. And I noticed that engineers are concerned and they're supporting the tolling plan. And I keep wanting to say, wait, the Republican Policy Group's plan, which we call BridgeWorks, it gives you more money
More money.
More money for construction. None for interest. Right?
Right.
None for gantries. It gives you more money for your paychecks.
And you're not hurting your people.
And you're not hurting the state.
Right.
But, all right, so we were at that hearing, and there were 3 different plans that came forward in the House Finance Committee, and I'm not sure that folks realize that there really are 3 responsible plans that were put out there that would still fix our bridges without tolls.
Right.
And of course, there's the Bridge Works plan, which I think the people have heard about before, but I'll just say it really quickly. No new taxes, no new fees, no interest payments, no tolls. $862 million in the 10 years' time, and everything would be fixed without this bond that hangs over our head forever. And tolls, Director Alviti, under questioning by me, admitted that he intends the tolls to be eternal, perpetual.
Right.
And seriously, he started rattling off like billions of dollars worth of projects that were just going to keep coming and coming and coming, and they'll never have to come back to us in the House, in the State House for permission.
Right.
But there was one from RIPEC. Did you look at the one from RIPEC?
Yes, I did, and that was a good plan too. Not as good as the RPG plan.
No, I didn't think so either, but
it was much better than the toll plan.
yeah, it was. He was basically saying that if we pass the toll plan, which probably by this time has passed, the DOT will get a $700 million slush fund by the 15th year. In other words, collect more money than they need. That's damaging to our economy, to take all that money out of our economy, right? Out of consumers.
Right.
But the RIPEC plan was based on just borrow $515 million. You know, I don't like it because of all the borrowing. And yet it's better than the governor's plan, because she wanted to borrow $600 million.
Right.
And she's going out and saying, oh, too much borrowing. And I want to say, well, in June, you wanted more borrowing than the RIPEC plan.
Right.
Right? And of course, in her budget, you commented on the budget just recently. You want to tell us what you thought of the budget?
I thought that if you're going to increase the budget by, what was it, $130 million? How many bridges can you fix with that?
$130 million is what she's increasing it by. That's right, 3.5%. You know, and actually inside her budget is $650 million worth of borrowing on top of it.
Right.
So I guess if you're going to cherry pick friends to give money to, it's okay to borrow $650 million. But if you want to fix bridges with it, not so much.
Well,
just an editorial comment.
What I found to be overwhelmingly a sad state of affairs is that the gross amount of $45 million, what it drills down to, what the net amount is after they pay all their fees for who's collecting these tolls and the infrastructure costs and the interest cost, it comes down to under $15 million. And with a $9 billion budget, we should sneeze and be able to come up with $15 million.
That's right. I'm glad you reminded me of that. We actually did the numbers, and we were very conservative, really conservative. They're going to take $45 million in from the tolls, and at the end of the day, after you take all the costs for managing those gantries and fixing them and the credit card fees, you end up with $14.5 million.
Right.
Not a very good return on investment.
I'm surprised these Wall Street people, I mean, they're the ones benefiting from it. That's why you don't hear anything.
That's right. That's right.
I thought the Democrats were for the hard-working taxpayers. I didn't think that they were for the Wall Street people. What happened?
I think the people out there are going to have to answer that, because you're right. I mean, you and I and our colleagues, our Republican colleagues, are fighting really hard for just the average families out there, right, to keep the burden off of them.
Right.
And our Democrat colleagues are doing everything they can to pile more on top of them. I mean, even that budget is 3.5% growth. I'll be honest with you, I don't think the families in my district have seen their budgets, their family income grow by 3.5% a year. I just don't think it's happening. I know Social Security didn't grow at all this year, right?
No.
But somehow state government can always just keep looking for more and more sources of revenue, and that's hurtful.
Well, the sad thing is, where does it stop? How many people with means leave this state because they just can't take it anymore? And it's not always to go to sunny places. It could be any state. It could be cold states, warm states. They've had enough. I have a constituent that left, and he went to another state, and he said, the reason that I'm leaving is because right now I have somebody that can buy my house. He said, I'm afraid that there's going to come a point nobody's going to be able to buy my house.
Yeah.
That's a sad commentary.
It's a really sad commentary. And again, I mean, I come from West Warwick. Part of my district is Coventry. The folks are good people, and they're not poor, but they're not rolling in dough either. And these kinds of things will hurt them, right? Think about it. Social Security, because the price of gas went down, Social Security had no cost of living increase this year. So those folks in my district, your district, who are living on Social Security saw no increase in their family income. And yet the governor proposes a budget that increases the state's income by 3.5%.
Right.
It's just at some point we have to use the money that we're given wisely and prioritize inside of it. Our plan would have taken 0.5% of the budget to fix roads and bridges. 0.5%. Come on.
We'd have safe bridges. Everybody wants to fix our bridges. People say, don't you want to fix the bridges and the roads? Of course. Nobody says not to fix the bridges and the roads. And 0.5%, I don't think anybody would even feel that pinch.
No, seriously. Well, and we found the sources of income in our budget. We didn't touch social services, we didn't touch vital services, but we found the money. In fact, we found more than the governor was proposing. So, listen, we're going to continue this in just a minute, but right now we're going to say, are you kidding me?
State Representative Joe McNamara is widely regarded by his colleagues in the chamber as the best advocate in the House that a sea creature ever had. His undying affection for the Lagos squid is widely known, especially when it's prepared as calamari. Now this friend of the deep is at it again on the floor of the Rhode Island House. Are you kidding me? I would never do such a thing. Look up House Bill 7111. This time, McNamara has recruited his colleagues, Reps. Azanaro, Corvesi, and Kennedy, to sponsor legislation with him to enshrine the harbor seal as the state's marine mammal. What an honor. It rivals the act in the last session to make the earth-boring scarab beetle the state insect. This bill certainly tops Rep. McNamara's previous magnum opus from that session, elevating calamari to the status of the state's official appetizer. It may sound like there's an echo in here, but I have to ask again. With the budget in deficit, state pension plans way underwater, crumbling infrastructure, the highest unemployment rate in the region, burgeoning labor costs with no incremental value argument, and many more critical issues promising imminent pain and suffering to Rhode Islanders, do we actually pay these guys to come up with this stuff? Are you kidding me?
Find us on Cox Channel 15 or Verizon Channel 34, Saturday at 4 p.m. or Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on the web at www.gatsbyproject.com/Common Sense Rhode Island. Like us on Facebook at Common Sense RI, and follow us on Twitter at @Common Sense RI.
Welcome back. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and this handsome guy to my right is Representative Anthony Giarrusso from East Greenwich. We're talking about the tolling proposal and about what happens now, right? So we think that by this time the tolling proposal is probably passed. If we had passed one of the alternatives, what would be happening now?
There would be 6,000 people ready to start working today.
Yeah, and no damage to the trucking industry, to consumers, right? people to work, bridges getting fixed, no damage to the economy. How long does it take for the governor's plan to start working?
Well, they said that by the time they get these up and implemented and they can start hiring for the first job is 18 to 24 months.
18 to 24 months.
So if our bridges are really in that sad a shape, then is that 18 to 24 months seems like an awfully long time.
It's an awfully long time to take our safety lightly, isn't it? If they're telling the truth. But that's another matter. I actually talked with the Truckers Association. I think you were there when we talked about, I asked him, well, are you going, I understand you are going to, you have been researching litigation against tolling trucks only, and then also trying to find truckers that leave the road, even to go around a gantry. There are federal regulations that say it's probably not legal. And he said that they would not be able to start those suits against the state until after the gantries are built and the first trucker has to pay a toll. What jeopardy does that put our state in?
Well, I'm not, nobody ever accused me of being a Nostradamus or anything like that, but it sounds to me like a perfect setup that there will be litigation and we're going to lose, and we're already going to have $60 million or so invested into this. We're already paying on the bonds. So they're going to say, well, you know what, it's unconstitutional. So we can't take it back because we have so much money invested in it.
Because we have had the bonds already out there.
So now we have to toll the cars and toll everybody. And we'll toll the trucks a little bit more because we can do that by constitutional law, but we have to toll everybody. So I'm sorry. We told you before that you weren't going to get tolled, but sorry. You can't unring the bell, right?
That's right. Right. And then they'll fall back on, well, it's not constitutional, so we have to do it.
Right.
Right?
So,
and because all the bonds are out there, we've already put them out, we've already put the gantries up, we won't have any other choice because we will be indebted to the tune of what? Almost $500 million in bonds at that point, and gantries. So, bad news for Rhode Island. I don't know. So what is the next step? Are people just supposed to shrug their shoulders and say, well, okay, we're stuck?
No, I think our next step is nothing will ever change if it doesn't change. The same body that makes up this legislature that has been totally handcuffing us for the past 7 decades, and we're only getting worse. Every year there's another scandal. 38 Studios is going to sound like a candy store compared to some of these things that are coming up.
This is 38 Studios times 10, 20.
I mean, think about it. Every year there's something, and it's the Superman building, it's the Paw Sox, it's always something, and it's what's the next big thing. So what you need to do to change stuff is you have to turn over the legislature. If you just get involved. If your legislator is not voting for the people and he's voting for the special interest, or because somebody is making him a promise that doesn't help his people, then you have to vote him out. Either you run against him or support his or her opponent.
Yeah. I keep saying, I've been working so hard, you have too, to try to turn this thing back, get the alternative out on the table, have them look at it seriously. I keep saying, all the people who have called and emails and just everybody trying to get engaged in this and stop it, it shouldn't be this hard to get good government. And we can't get it with the same people that are there, obviously.
Right.
Yeah, it's just, as much as you talk with them and try to give them information and people are calling, it's not turning them away.
No.
And it shouldn't be this hard, and it won't be this hard if people get engaged. You're engaged now, and I hope you stay engaged because there is an election coming up. When is it?
Well, we have a primary in September, and we have a general in November.
That's right.
And that's when you can really speak as loud as you want.
Right. And if we get enough good people elected, I hope they're Republicans, quite frankly, but we only need 38 votes in the House to repeal this. And in the Senate, we only need 19. So if we could make those kinds of changes, independents, Republicans, we can repeal this and we can start putting Rhode Island into a place where we actually start representing the average person instead of the insiders. Because right now it's discouraging to go up there and fight so hard and come away empty.
I mean, the foundation of this state was built on the hardworking people of Rhode Island, not the special interest. But we've been hijacked. And the people of Rhode Island, the hard workers that are tired of paying the bills, they got to get involved, and they just have to say enough is enough. You know, it's like what Albert Einstein says about the definition of insanity.
What does Albert Einstein say?
He says insanity is when you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. So that's what we're doing. And it's, you know, and you have to reach, it's got to go broad-based. It has to be, even where you don't think that a legislator can be turned over, just everybody needs to get involved, and everybody needs to know how they stand. And this is a perfect example of who are you representing. If you're representing the people, I mean, I live in East Greenwich, and I'm getting a lot of phone calls, emails, and everything about, overwhelmingly, to oppose this. My phone hasn't stopped ringing. I'm sure I'm not alone. Yeah. I'm sure every rep and senator from Pawtucket all the way to Woonsocket to Westerly is getting the same proportion of calls that I'm getting. So if you are, and you're voting for this, then you're telling your people you're not representing them. Get them out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, my colleagues up there, I think most of them are nice people.
Yeah.
But it's one thing about being nice and shaking hands and that. The other is, how do you vote? Because at the final analysis, it's not whether they smile at you, right? It isn't. It's what do they represent? What are they doing to you in the State House? And in this case, they're doing something really bad to every average Rhode Islander, right? They are putting a price tag. They are just adding cost onto their backs. We had a guest just a little bit ago who said the average household income in Rhode Island since 2008, when we had that crisis, has gone down 12%.
Wow.
People are stressed. We've got to start acknowledging that in Rhode Island. We're not growing those good jobs. People aren't getting the promotions and the salary increases. We have to start acknowledging that and work in their best interests. And I don't see it happening up there. So step up.
Step up. And even with these gantries, when you can imagine the size of our state, to have at least 14 gantries. Not to mention, every gantry is also an information booth, and it's not just an ATM machine, it's an information booth. And somebody always knows where you are at all times. And that's only 14 to start. Who knows how many it's going to be afterwards.
Oh, yeah, it's not limited to 14.
Right.
But we're limited for this section of our program, so we'll be right back.
The governor has proposed a tax on marijuana. You know, to protect those who rely on medical marijuana to help their healthcare regimen. But for some reason, the biggest detractors of this tax are the medical marijuana patients themselves. Are you kidding me? The proposed tax would require legal marijuana growers to tag plants in order to differentiate their product from illegally purchased street weed. The tags would each cost $150 for patients who grow their own plants and $350 for caregivers who are allowed to provide marijuana for up to 5 patients. The state argues that these tags are a mechanism for ensuring better regulation and oversight and to see to it that their plants are being grown for their intended patients. But patients feel that this regulation could make their therapy cost prohibitive. Though the state estimates, according to the Providence Journal, that this regulation would cost approximately 2% of the profits of each plant, that doesn't reflect on the hardship many patients face when it comes to healthcare costs, as well as fees to the health department and costs of purchasing or growing this medicinal herb. Patients and caregivers criticize the state for not taking into account the high cost for cultivating marijuana, or that some crops can produce small amounts of product or fail outright. I'm all for finding a way to gather revenue on a product, especially for those who want to buy it for recreational purposes. But if the goal of this tax is to ensure access to a product for those who medically need it, while simultaneously minimizing access to those who illegally use or distribute it, I have to wonder who will really feel its bite. And unfortunately, it sounds like that group is comprised of Rhode Islanders who are already hurting. Are you kidding me?
Find us on Cox Channel 15 or Verizon Channel 34, Saturday at 4 p.m. or Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on the web at www.gatsbyproject.com/Common Sense Rhode Island. Like us on Facebook at Common Sense RI, and follow us on Twitter at @Common Sense RI.
Welcome back to Common Sense. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and this is Representative Anthony Giarrusso from East Greenwich. Anthony, we were talking about getting people involved, getting them to run for office. There's a lot of different things that the folks out there can do. They can volunteer to help. They can, pass out flyers and make phone calls and all those kinds of things, and they can run for office.
Right.
It's a little daunting, I think, for people to think about running for office. But I think our legislature desperately needs a new mixture of people. We have a lot of lawyers. We have a lot of municipal workers, firemen and retired teachers, policemen. Nothing against them, but it skewers the way that we look at our job in the legislature. What we don't have is a lot of businessmen.
Right.
Now, you're a businessman.
Yeah.
So give them a message.
Well, really what we need to do is increase the business IQ in that room. Like a perfect example is less than an hour ago, we voted out a bill that's going to impact our community. And at the end, it's going to be over $1 billion. And that was voted on by the majority of the members think that a balance sheet is something you put on your bed. I mean, they don't understand things of that nature. Like it's not, like, I'm not saying it in a bad way, but they don't have a businessman's hat. And I'm trying to get people to do that, because when I see stuff that has fiscal impact, I get it. We live that every day. Most people just see the trade-off between paying an electric bill and going on vacation. My thing is, as you alluded to before, I have the responsibility of 100 people paying their mortgages and their car payments and their children's tuitions. So I think I know a little bit more than the average person in a legislature. But I highly encourage anybody to do it. And Rhode Island's been a very good place for me and my family. I mean, we came here when we were very young, and this was my way of giving back. So as I got a little bit older, I delegated a lot more, and it afforded me the privilege of serving my community. And I recommend it for anybody. And it's a noble thing to do. It's the right thing to do. And we're complaining, so now we can get involved.
I honestly think that our legislature needs business-oriented folks in it, because nobody knows better than a businessman or a person who works in a business what the strains on business are. What things are we doing up there that hurt business? How can we really help them? How can we change the basic building blocks of our economy? I don't think that there's that business sense up there. And we need it desperately, because our numbers are dismal. In almost any metric, Rhode Island is not doing well. And if we're in those low levels, then the people who depend on us to have a good government that responds to them and helps them to have a good financial security, they're not getting served well. All right, so let's tell folks what it takes to be in the legislature. We're there
3 days a week from January to June. And it's not, that's what, as a matter of fact, you were instrumental in my running for the office that I seeked out in 2012. So I don't know if I should say thank you or something else, and because my biggest concern was, I have a business, and I have, a wife, and I have some 4 children, and 2 of them were under 16 years old at the time. So how much am I taking away from my family and my business? And you so eloquently told me that it's not a life changer, that you can get a lot of things done and it doesn't totally occupy your life. And for the most part, you were correct.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Well, I work full-time too, because I'm a financial advisor. We have to be down there at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from the first week of June until, first week of January to June, middle of June. Roughly, it's about 60 days a year that you have to be down there at 4 o'clock. Now, for folks that are in the private industry, that means that they'll have to leave work about 3:30 to get down there. But they can be home for supper every night.
Right.
Every night. Especially in the early months, sessions last to 5:15. And it's not until we start meeting in committees that they might have one longer night where they stay until 6:30 or so. But most every night you can be home for supper, right? And I know
yes.
you go home faithfully to supper all the time. His wife makes good food.
And she's beautiful too, of course.
Yeah, when you hear of the long, long nights, those are rare. We did one the other night in Finance Committee.
But not everybody's on the Finance Committee.
But not everybody's on the Finance Committee. And most of the time, those long nights are like 3 or 4 nights at the very end of session.
Right.
So it's not hard for you to be with your family, to get your work done. You're cutting off a little bit from the workday, about an hour, hour and a half. But if you can maybe make arrangements to do it on a Saturday or make up time some other time, it's a really good thing to do to help Rhode Island be a stronger place. Make a plea to the businessmen out there for me.
Listen, some of you guys already know about it because I've talked to you before. But if you're running a business, you're the person that we want. And you don't have to own the business. You could be a shift manager, you could be an accountant, a CPA, financial planner, it doesn't matter. You just have to have some kind of an IQ that you're qualified to get into the weeds of these financial decisions that we have to make every day up there.
Yeah, I've talked with small business owners and they say, oh geez, I really can't do it. And I said, well, do you have anybody who works for you who's kind of political, who likes to talk politics, that you could recommend, you could trust to do it? You know, could you give them, it's roughly 90 hours a year that they would have to give them up or have them other arrangements for them to work from home or something. 90 hours a year to get better government in Rhode Island. And I understand that's money that's coming out of your payroll, but I think it would come back to you manyfold.
Yeah. And the sad part is we need to change the temperature of the whole body, because what's the percentage of reps and senators that don't even have an opponent from election to election? It's overwhelming.
And hopefully that won't be true this year.
Right.
Because you folks who are listening now, contact us. Contact the Republican Party. They'll help. And there are a lot of people who are now waking up to the idea that they're not being well served by the people who are in there now. Not if they pass this bill through. And I believe it's not a minority of people. It is a loud majority of people who know that something is terribly broken and needs to be fixed. And again, the Republican Party will train you on how to run. You did it from knowing nothing. You did it and you won, right? They help with putting brochures together and signs and how to go door to door and the whole thing. It feels a little daunting, but you will have people there to help you.
Yeah.
And if you can't run yourself, you can help the candidate. You can be a manager. You can do errands for them. You can pick up their literature, do literature drops to make it less expensive. We need people engaged because we can't keep having government like this one. Any closing thoughts? You always have an Anthony-ism.
Oh, God. Well, Yeah, and if it can't be you doing it or running, what's really important is have the structure. And you can have people, or you can organize, go into your neighborhood, go canvassing in your neighborhood, and just help out a candidate. We need all the help we could get.
Rhode Island needs all the help it can get.
The state is counting on all of us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Find us on Cox Channel 15 or Verizon Channel 34, Saturday at 4 p.m. or Sunday at 10 a.m. Find us on the web at www.gatsbyproject.com/Common Sense Rhode Island. Like us on Facebook at Common Sense RI, and follow us on Twitter at @Common Sense RI.
Governor Raimondo presented her budget proposal to the General Assembly this week. It was loaded with a line item for every special interest in the state. Looking at how she thinks we should spend the expected revenues doesn't jive with what it will cost to manage the affairs of the state, in my opinion. What I really don't understand is why she wants to put us further in debt. Now, you and I know that if we are to manage our personal financial assets, we have to follow some basic rules. You can't spend what you don't have, so we save enough to do the things we think are fun and important, right? Now, college for the kids was a big one for us. Now, what if you wanted to send your kids to a Rhode Island school, for instance, to be one of the 11,829 full-time enrolled at URI in 2014? It would take $26,885. But if you don't save enough, your kid, on average, leaves URI in debt $30,731. Here in Rhode Island, it is perfectly acceptable to have 71% of URI graduates owing that much or more. Rick is no better. 71% have an average debt of $25,567. Now, the Bryant kids are paying $53,598 a year to leave school with an average debt of $39,283, about the same as Providence College. The state average is $31,841, and that ranks us 4th worst in the country for college debt. Surprised? The 65% with debt is a little better at 14% nationally. So I guess our college graduates are very familiar with debt, and so are all their parents, the administrators, and the teachers in Rhode Island. Debt seems to be the natural order of things. So how does it look for Rhode Island government's debt? Well, it seems we have had a state debt of $18.86 billion as of January of 2014. So this is a little old news. Now, that means it would take $17,960 from each resident to pay off the debt. Actually, Rhode Island owes more than it owns. Rhode Island is one of the 39 sinkhole states without assets enough to cover its debt. We have $3.7 billion of assets to pay bills totaling $8.6 billion. One of the big problems is state bonds, to the tune of $4.7 billion of debt. So here we go again with the governor suggesting that we should commit to $500 million of new debt, $230 million in general obligation bonds, and $300 million with the roadworks bonds. We are bond crazies. Since 2000, Rhode Island leads the nation in the number of bonds on the ballot. That would be 32. One other state had that number. 8 states offered only one bond over that same period of time. The average looks like about 5 or so, but 32? California, Maine, Texas, and Little Rhody seem to be all about bonding. Why? Is it because we are so accustomed to debt that we don't care anymore? Or we have no other way to pay for anything? That's it, of course. If you and I want our kids to get out of college debt-free, we have to plan for that to happen. If we as taxpayers in the state of Rhode Island want to operate with a balanced budget where we set aside funds for specific things like roads and bridges, then we sit down and we get it done. Now that means, of course, that we need to elect people to office who will do just that. Now I have little to no faith that we are positioned to win this one, but hope springs eternal. November is coming. Please keep track of how your legislator did with this budget. Thank you for watching, and God bless.